Today we're going to talk about the cardiovascular system, and one of the main organs we'll talk about is the heart, which we all know is very critical for survival. There was this football player who was actually in high school, and he actually had heart failure during one of the games. So this is what a nice healthy heart should look like. You might notice it as the electrical activity of the heart. And what had to happen was they had to use this defibrillator to basically jumpstart his heart to get the electrical activity to start working again. So those are some of the topics we'll talk about today. How the electrical activity of the heart works and what a healthy heartbeat should look like. So today's plan is to have an overview of the cardiovascular system first. Then we'll talk about blood vessels. That'll be covered in this first video. The next video will talk about the heart and the cardiac cycle, including blood flow and disorders. And the last video will talk about blood. The cardiovascular system consists of three major components. One is the heart itself, and its job is to pump the blood. Then there are the blood vessels, and their job is to carry the fluid, to basically carry the blood. And finally, there's the fluid itself, and in this case, it's blood, and its job is to distribute the nutrients that need to circulate around the body. So the overall functions of the cardiovascular system include transport. So imagine you're breathing in, right? You breathe in the oxygen through your nose, but eventually that oxygen needs to make it to your entire body. So the cardiovascular system with the blood is going to carry and transport that oxygen to the rest of your body. Same things like, for instance, digestive system. Here, when you eat food, it's ultimately going into your digestive system, and from there, it's going to be absorbed in the blood so that nutrients can be delivered throughout your entire body. Another function of the cardiovascular system is protection. One of the main components of blood is going to be white blood cells, and their job is going to defend against disease. Lastly is regulation. So you might notice that when you exercise, you might turn, for instance, red in the face, like this guy right here. What's happening there is blood is actually coming to the surface of the skin to help release some of the heat from inside the body produced by your muscles when you exercise. And so that blood flowing to the skin, releasing the heat, is actually helping to regulate your body temperature. So let's first discuss the blood vessels. So remember, the blood vessel's job is to transport the blood throughout your whole body. Now there's three types of blood vessels. The first are called arteries, and what they do is they always carry blood away from the heart. So if here's the heart, if you go away, you're using an artery. So I like to remember A for artery, A for away. Next comes capillaries. So capillaries will exchange anything between the blood vessel and the rest of your body or your lungs. For example, at lungs, you might need to exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide. That'll happen through capillaries. Or at your body, you also might need to exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide, or maybe some nutrients. That again will happen through capillaries. After the exchange takes place, you're going to use veins. Now the veins' job is to carry the blood back to the heart. So let's take a look at each one of these in a little more detail. Let's look at the arteries that carry blood away from the heart. So here's the heart, and here the blood is going to flow through the artery away from the heart. Now if we were to look at the walls of the artery, right here, you'll notice that there is a nice layer of smooth muscle. You might recall when we learned about muscles, there's three types: skeletal, smooth, and cardiac. Smooth muscle is found here because, remember, smooth muscles line the body cavity or hollow organ, which is inside the blood vessel, and you can't control it. So you can't voluntarily, for instance, squeeze your arteries. The smooth muscle is going to help the blood move through the arteries. So when the muscle contracts, the blood is pushed forward. The other type of tissue you'll see right here in the brown is elastic tissue. Now you might remember elastic is very stretchy. So this means that when blood is pumped through the arteries, it can actually expand to accommodate that force of blood pumping through the arteries. After the arteries, you'll see it branch into smaller, what we call arterial. So the artery is a large vessel, and then the arterial gets smaller, still pumping blood away from the heart. The arterial's job is to control blood pressure. So the arterioles can contract and expand to adjust the blood pressure. Next, we have the capillaries. Capillaries, remember, exchange between vessels and tissue. So, for instance, here are the arteries, arterial, and then now we have the capillaries. And the capillaries, you'll notice, branch out. And we call the branching out a capillary bed. Over here is actually a real picture of capillary beds, and you can see the entire network. Now, the reason why we have the whole capillary bed and not just one capillary going straight through is that it increases the surface area for exchange. So let me give you a little example on why that's important, why it's important to have so many capillaries. Imagine you're checking out at a big grocery store, and the grocery store only had one line. Now that's not going to be efficient, right? If everyone needs to check out of the grocery store at that one line, exchange their money for some food, that line's going to be way too long, not efficient at all. But you know, when you go to the grocery store, they might have 5 or 10 lanes open. They have so many lanes because you can process the customers faster and do the exchange of money and food. So the same thing like the capillary bed. You don't want just one capillary going through, because remember, you have to exchange a lot of stuff in and out of the capillary. So if you just have one, that's going to be too slow. Instead, you branch it out, basically having more surface area or more lines so that more exchange can occur. All right, next we're going to use the veins. The veins is now going to carry the blood back towards the heart. So we have over here the veins. Now first, we're going to have a particular type of vein called a venule, and that's the smaller version of the vein. So that's going to be this one right here. And then it's going to connect up to the larger vein proper. And if you look at the walls of the vein are actually thinner than the walls of the artery. And you can see that over here in this picture. Here's the artery wall, and here's the vein wall. And that's because veins actually have a lot less pressure than arteries. They're further away from the heart, and the heart is what actually gives the blood all of its pressure when it pumps. Since there's less pressure, you don't need the walls to be as thick. You also have valves that are attached to the walls of the vein. That's going to be important because these valves are like one-way doors. So they're going to help the blood flow back up to the heart. Since, again, there's not that much pressure of blood in veins, it's hard for the blood to keep moving. So the valves are going to help push the blood forward and keep it flowing in that forward direction towards the heart. Sometimes there's a problem when the valves don't work, and this could actually end up with what you might know as varicose veins. If you think about where you get varicose veins, they tend to be in the legs or the lower limbs, and what it looks like is kind of bumpy, blue, almost even like spiders. They kind of branch out. So varicose veins, what happens is that blood is actually pooling up inside the vein. And that could be because, for instance, you're on your feet a lot, there's a lot of pressure pushing down. For instance, in pregnancy, there's a lot of pressure. And so the blood is pushed downward. And what happens is the valves don't work. Here, this valve is closed, nice and normal, so the blood can't flow back down, right? It keeps going up. In varicose veins, the valves are actually leaky. So the blood comes back down and pulls up down here because the valves aren't keeping it going in a forward direction. And that pooling of the blood gives you these bumpy varicose veins. So just to give an overview a summary of the overview and your blood vessels. 1. The cardiovascular system consists of heart, vessels, and blood which function to transport, protect, and regulate. Blood vessels transport blood through arteries, capillaries, and